For class 3 restoration, what I typically like to do is etch the enamel surfaces first for at least 10 seconds, and then I put the remaining etch inside where the dentin is for at least 20 seconds. So I had already had that on. Now I'm going to dry it. You want to make sure that you don't over dry your area and desiccate it. I'm going to use my mirror to make sure I got all of that out. And typically what's requested or suggested is that you rinse for the same amount of time that you etched, okay? So now I'm going to apply the bonding solution. And as usual, you always want to make sure that you follow the manufacturer's instructions. So apply your bond to the Kavo surface margin. Anywhere that you etched, you should be applying your bond. So can you see in the mirror? I should get another mirror. This one has a scratch on it. Make sure that the size of your micro brush fits the prep properly. It's really important. Always make sure that you hold your light parallel to the tooth. In other words, you don't want to come at the tooth like this. You want to hold it parallel. You can turn the tip of your light whatever way feels better for you, and then you can also cure it from the other side if you need to. Okay. So after etching and bonding, you can start the sandwich technique and apply some flowable composite. So you can apply this, since this is a class 3 through and through preparation, you can apply this from the facial surface, put a little bit on the axial wall, or you can apply it from the lingual surface. So people like to use the flowable because what this does is it does just what the name says. It flows down into any little nooks and crannies that your packable material might not get to. Once you place that, then you cure it. You hear me say this so many times, but I'm going to keep saying it because it's important. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions for whatever materials you are using. Don't just assume that all materials are the same. They are not. The viscosity of your filling materials are going to be different as well. So be familiar with what materials you're using. And this, remember that this tip turns as well. So I don't want you turning your wrists any weird ways. I want you to turn this tip so that your wrist is straight, okay? You put your finger on the other side of this strip, which is now becoming the wall, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze this and put a little bit of material in between there, okay? And I kind of use the tooth to push the remaining material off of the tip. Then I have my plastic instrument. I'm going to use the nib part of it and use that as the condenser. I can use the point of it, I can use the side of it, but what I want to make sure I do is I want to push that material up against the walls. You have the gingival wall, the distal wall, the incisal wall. You want to make sure that you're condensing this properly, and if I hold my finger nice and tight to that mylar strip, I'm creating a wall on the lingual. So before I cure this, I want to make sure that these areas are clean and I didn't squish any of this composite up through this embrasure here and the gingival embrasure here. So I'm cleaning that first. Then notice I didn't move this finger at all, but I'm pulling the strip nice and tight. And before I cure, I make sure that this is clean in that area. So then I'm going to cure it. The teeth on the anterior, especially lateral to lateral, are so thin that you don't have to worry about putting a lot of different layers in there, because sometimes adding multiple layers can cause issues. There are little voids and things like that. So in a tooth such as this, maybe 2 layers would be best. Regardless of how many layers, you want to make sure that when you apply another layer that it's bonded well and sealed well with the layer that was previously placed. So I'll show you here. It's a little rough here, and that's just the bond, but this is not completely filled yet, but you can see that there's a nice shape so far. So I'm going to keep my finger pressed against here. The wedge that I chose was big enough to create a little bit of a separation here, and that's exactly what you want. So when you pull that out, the teeth go back together again, and then you have a nice tight contact in there, okay? So I'm going to hold my finger tight against that lingual surface, and I'm going to add a little more material to the facial surface right there. And now I'm going to use the paddle, and you make sure that your instruments are clean, because if they're not clean, you're going to end up having like a scratchy surface. So you can pat it down in. You want to make sure that you're sealing the margins and removing any of that material that may have squished out in the incisal embrasure, just like before, or the gingival embrasure. So you can use an instrument like an Explorer, but you got to watch, because if you're using this, you don't want to take material away, in other words. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull this nice and tight, pulling from the lingual and from the facial, nice and tight. Use the instrument here to make sure it's tight up against there, and then cure. See, once you cure, if you don't have it the way you want it, you're going to end up having to spend all this additional time with the lightning strip, removing that material from the embrasure areas. And you don't want to have to do that. So Get everything exactly the way you want it before you cure it. It's going to make your life so much easier. I'm going to cure this from the lingual then again, please. Just right here. I almost said please. Like I have an assistant. Well, my right arm is my assistant right now. Okay. All right, so don't take the strip out yet until you've checked it from the facial and the lingual surface. Any of this little flash that came out, you can get off when you're polishing it. But did you see that little piece that came out? Like, even though I tried to make sure that the embrasures were good, when you pull that strip over, if you have a lot of extra material here, it's going to squish up in there. There's a lot of flash on the lingual, actually, because that's good to show you guys. So when you do things and you do something wrong, that's actually a good thing for you all, because then you learn now on a Tipidon what to do whenever you're actually working on a person and you're like, oh my gosh, this never happened to me at school, now what do I do? So I'm going to go ahead and remove this stuff.